Welcome to TriTech University. My name is Bill Steppen, and today we are going to complete our trifecta of broadcasts revolving around online contracts, the setup, and the usage of them. So if you're just joining us today, welcome. Although you might be a little missing out on some of the other things that we have talked about in the previous two sessions this month. So if you haven't already done so, definitely make yourself a note to go back and check out the recordings of those live streams. You can find them in the recent live streams playlist on the normal video channel. But for those of you who have been attending all of those and are dying to see the spine-tingling conclusion, well, that is what we're here for today. So in the previous two sessions, we talked about the general overview of this whole process, the setup of the schools, the setup of the districts within those schools, or rather the schools within those districts, the teachers that teach at those schools, and your relationship to those teachers. We then switched gears and talked a little bit about the inventory and all of the components that go together with that inventory, such as accessories and delivery choices and maintenance plans and grades and all of that. And today we're going to tie it all together into a nice, hopefully pretty bow and talk about how this connects to your website on the Vortex platform and ultimately how you can process these rentals when they come in. So let's always, as usual, check out our normal housekeeping rules. So over to the right is the chat tab. You'll find the playlist and the chat tabs there adjacent. Click to that tab, and then down at the bottom you can click the nickname button so that you can chat with me and you can ask questions and you can just say hi and say, hey, how's it going? Love to hear from you, and I also definitely want to make sure I'm making sense. So definitely log in, even if you don't have any intentions of chatting right now. At least that way, if you do have a question, you'll be ready to go ahead and ask that if the opportunity presents itself. I will keep a monitor on all of the incoming questions here right in front of me. But let's go ahead and do like we always do and switch over to my presentation screen. So we're just continuing with the music setup as I have been using up to this point. As I also had mentioned at one point, I believe at the very beginning, if you are offering online contracts for other services and you're not in the music industry, this can be tweaked to that as well. And I imagine I will be doing, in fact, I saw someone had requested it, talking about how to use this process for other services such as memberships and things like that. But for the purposes of this month, we are focusing exclusively on school contracts for our music customers. Hello, Tracy. Good to see you again. Hopefully you're doing well. Okay, so continuing with our our setup, everything pretty much revolving around online contracts is right here in this contract setup launcher. And we already talked about, like I said, the districts, the schools, the teachers last or 2 Tuesdays ago. Last Thursday, we talked about the grades and the delivery and maintenance and accessories and the inventory. And then we talked a little bit about the plan and rate table. And what we're going to do now is we're going to tie those two sections together using what's called the inventory accessory school links. Now, I'm going to be doing a lot of jumping around, so I apologize if I go a little fast, and I know there's a bit of a delay between what I'm saying right now at this present moment and what you're hearing, and then even more of a delay to the chat menu, so I'm going to try and keep cognizant of that. But to tie all these sections together, we're going to take a look at inventory and accessory school links. Now this is going to bring up a table and my big fat head's in the way, but hopefully this will make sense. What this is viewing right now is the active list of the teachers that you had set up back here in this step. So no matter what you do, if you've been setting up teachers and you want at least one teacher per school, they will show up here in no particular order. I'm going to click on the first one. And like I said, I'm going to be doing a bit of a jumping around here. So there's two tabs in this setup. This first tab that we're on right now is the schools and teachers. And the second tab is the inventory and accessories. I'm going to do my best to not cough into the microphone. Okay, so When you first come into this list, hi Rich, I hope you're doing well. When you first come into this list, the left-hand side is going to be a listing of all of the inventory, all of the instruments that you set up back in this inventory section. The whole idea of this is that, especially if you are talking about a particular teacher, and if you need a reminder of which teacher you're on, that will be displayed up here at the top. In this case, we're in the Dubuque Community District, Audubon School teacher Barb Fleming. Now, Barb very likely teaches a good number of these instruments, but maybe not all of them. That's the whole idea here. You can go down the list, and whatever instruments you offer for rent, you can pair those instruments with the teacher. So, assuming that Barb here teaches everything, and I actually have everything kind of checkmarked here, there is a bit of functionality here as far as taking these elements and cloning them, but I'm not going to get into that just yet. Actually, I was just right-clicking to see if there was kind of a tag all option, and there does not appear to be. So technically, you're going to want to go down this list and make sure that you checkmark each instrument that the teacher can actually teach and provide lessons on. Then as you click on each one, notice how over to the right, what is listing over here kind of changes depending on the instruments selected. What this is displaying for you are the delivery and maintenance and accessory choices that you flagged as optional for that instrument. Now, this is going to have me jumping around a little bit, so again, try to grasp what I'm talking about here, because it can be a little confusing to try and put into words. But do you see how there's a default here? And this default is going to say either true or false. When you first come into this list, anything that is marked true is going to be checkmarked. Anything that is marked false is not going to be checkmarked. The ultimate thing that we want to think about is what is checkmarked here for the instrument for this teacher. Because if we think back to last week, Thursday, I talked about how the accessory table is a global table of all accessories that you provide, whether or not they apply to every single instrument. And that holds true especially for potential choices of something for that given instrument from one teacher to another. I'm going to try and put this into a different into some examples here. For example, and I don't have an exact listing here, which unfortunately is the case, but do you see how there's a flute method book here? Now let's pretend this is the essential elements method book. Maybe Barb teaches using essential elements, and if that were the case, we would want to make sure that this is checkmarked for Barb for this instrument. Maybe there's another line item here for standards of excellence, and Barb does not use standards of excellence. What we would want to make sure of is that, assuming we saw it here on this list, it is not checkmarked for Barb. Because ultimately on the website, when your customer goes through the online rental process and says, hey, my child attends Dubuque Community District, Audubon School, and is taking her lessons, his or her lessons with Barb Fleming, and she wants to take the flute, she wants to learn flute, we want to make sure that the accessories that the parent purchases are useful for those lessons. So we only want to make sure we display the things that are applicable to that combination of school, teacher, and instrument. That's the whole idea with this, inventory, accessories, and school linkings. So again, they're only going to show the things that you marked as optional. Now again, I want to kind of bounce back and forth a little bit. Let's go back to the inventory setup. If you recall, if you were here last week on Thursday, when you're setting up your instruments here, you have the ability to mark something as optional as well as mark something as default as far as these accessories are concerned for that given instrument. Now, notice how reeds and sax care kits and sax method books don't show up when I go to take a look at the flute. And that's because none of those were marked as optional. Now, if I go back to inventory And let's just hypothetically pretend that this Sax Care Kit is something that might be useful for flute rentals and flute lessons, but not necessarily for every combination of instructor out there. We would want to mark that as optional. So notice I've got that check mark now. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now if we go back to the inventory accessory links, select Barb, go to the accessories tab, notice how the Sax Care Kit shows up here now, but it's not checkmarked. And you can see, hopefully, that this says this is false. So whether it's true or false here or not is not the important thing. What we want to make sure of is that if this is applicable to this teacher, we checkmark it here. Notice how this stays as false and it's checkmarked. So whether it's checkmarked as default back on the inventory setup is how it shows up here to begin with, or rather if it's checked as optional is determining whether it's showing up here to begin with. But if it's something that we expect to be on most, if not all, of the combinations of teacher and instrument, we want to mark it as defaulted so that way we don't have to check mark it every single time for every single combination of teacher. If it's something that we know is an option but not always the case, we then do what we did with the Sax Care Kit. We mark it as optional, but we do not mark it as default. And that way it'll show up just like these other options did. And then if we need to, we could always uncheck one of the choices. Say, for example, and I don't know, maybe Barb, out of the good graces of her heart, provides her own flute care kit. So we do not need to sell that. So we could uncheck that, and then that way, that will not show up on the website for the customer to see and potentially purchase. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, the other thing that sometimes is confusing, and I'm actually going to go ahead and undo what I just did there. The other thing that sometimes can be confusing, if we think back to the accessory and the maintenance options, we talked about this whole option of default to selected and required. This whole concept of whether it's required or not is completely independent from whether or not the instructor requires it. If the instructor requires it, then you want to make sure it's flagged as at least optional and checkmarked ultimately for that teacher. It's just whether or not it's a requirement that they purchase it from you. So that's kind of the idea with this. Now, of course, there are going to be certain scenarios where you've got a whole list of brothers and sisters who have taken the same lessons, and maybe they have those method books from prior or older siblings having taken those lessons and stuff like that. So even though you mark it as required and require the customer to purchase it, maybe you're open to working with that parent and not actually selling the book if that's the case. But that's completely outside of this. The whole idea with the online rentals is we are just trying to streamline it as much as possible so that we can keep it simple for both the parents and the potential renters, as well as you at the store and your staff that's processing these. So that basically is the final step of this setup. Again, accessory, inventory, school links, going down the list, going from one teacher to another, selecting which instruments are able to be taught or certified, qualified, whatever, to be taught by that particular instructor, going in and selecting the appropriate accessories that go pair in hand in hand with that instrument for that instructor. And notice how there's no save button here. In fact, if I get my head out of the way, you can see there's no save button. The whole idea with this is that as soon as you make these selections, they are instantaneously showing up on the website. See, the website doesn't contain its own separate snapshot of this. When your customers go to your online rental site and say rent now, that C2B or API security computer that you have on premise connected to your network, that is the connection between the website and your AIM database. So when someone says I'm renting online, they are actually then getting a signal. The website is reaching into your local network, grabbing that information from AIM in real time, and then displaying that on the website as far as the districts, the schools, the teachers, the instruments, the grades, the rates, etc., etc., etc. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of the simplification of this setup, because obviously if you've got a huge list of teachers and then by extension a huge list of instruments, this can get a little daunting. One thing I want to point out up here is the next and previous buttons. So again, remember how I started on Barb. If I wanted to go right down the list to the next instructor, I don't have to go back to the first tab and click to Beth like I just did. You can see up here now it says Beth. I can just click the next button, and then that will go to the next teacher down the list, in this case, Michelle. So you can see it just went right to the next one. The other thing you can do is, notice how there's these buttons up here for select teacher records for mass update. If I click this, this will bring up a list of the teacher for basically the linking. And let's say I want to go with Barb's setup. I'll go ahead and click OK on that. And then you can see how it says clone all inventory accessory settings for this teacher to selected teachers. So now technically when I go back here, I want to actually select, because I'm on Barb's listing here. Technically I'm on Michelle's listing. So if Michelle's listing is applicable to all other teachers at Audubon, then I can look for all the Audubon teachers and then check mark those. There's a tag all here for that. I may also want to say that any other instances of Michelle, because obviously she's all over the place here. I can do the same thing there. I can tag all for that. So basically the whole idea here is you're selecting combinations of teachers and schools, and then you can click over here and it'll say the selected instrument setting will be copied to all selected school teacher records. Are you sure? You say yes, and then it goes through, and all of the settings that came from Michelle Long at Audubon have now been effectively cloned to these other teachers. That way, if you know that basically those setups are kind of consistent across the board for certain combinations, you can definitely do that. So again, that's the idea here. That completes the setup part of this whole online contract process. Now, with the remaining time today, I want to switch gears and talk about processing these incoming rental requests. So we're going to go to the modules menu, down to Active E, and then you're going to go to where it says Post Online Contracts. There's also a View Online Contracts, but we're going to go to Post Online Contracts. In this posting area, excuse me, any customers who have gotten to the final step online and have submitted their rental will show up here without you having to do anything special such as pulling them in or anything. You can list them by date, name, reference number, order, any combination you like. And notice how they're all showing up here in red, and none of them have an account number right now. Now, if you also use our Vortex, or technically not even necessarily our Vortex, but if you use our e-commerce solutions, you might be familiar with the whole concept of locking an order for processing. Notice how all of these buttons here, most of these buttons here just behind my head, are pretty much grayed out, with the exception of the lock and the unlock and a few others here. When we lock a contract request for processing, it will come up here and say this is now locked by, and then whoever you're logged in as. Right now I'm logged in as the default employee. And then some extra buttons have now become available. The main one here is Link Customer. When I click Link Customer, actually before I even get to that, the whole idea of locking, for those of you who aren't in the know, means that no one else can be working on this same rental request. So if someone else is logged in and also working on these orders, they won't be able to work on the same one. That prevents the possibility of two different people trying to process the same order simultaneously. And I see Rich also has a question coming in. Let me get to your question in just a second, Rich. So just to kind of finish up what I'm talking about here with locking and linking, you might notice that the customer's line up here has now turned to green from red, but there's still no account number. We need to get that customer an account number. Now, if they're a returning customer, they might already have that, but we want to link the account that they created online, because they will have had to do that in order to be able to submit the request. You can see when we click that link customer button, it brings up a snapshot of what they filled in online as far as their address, city, email, phone number, etc., etc. Now, my recommendation is to start by clicking the match customer button. This will go out and attempt to find any matches by name, email, address, phone number, etc. And if it comes back with a potential match, it will list them out on the screen here for you to review and say, okay, yep, that is an actual match with an existing record of this same customer. Let's link the two together. Or, like this is the case, it says no matches found, or of the potential matches that it came up with, none of them really apply. In which case, you will go ahead and you'll click the Create Customer button. That will go ahead and take everything that they filled out online and put it right into their respective fields. Looks like I don't have a customer default back in my normal settings, which I'll show you where that is here in just a second. But basically, it would have taken all those details, filled them in where appropriate, name, address, etc., and then it would have assigned that customer an account number. As far as what that message was, where it says you need to set up a customer default, that's back here in the maintenance of ActiveE and the ActiveE setup. Up here at the top, the e-commerce and API. And then over here in the download orders tab, we just need the customer defaults set up here for, I'm going to make these be cash customers. And I think that's the only thing we really need here. Do we also need one here for long-term rental? Actually, this is what we need for in the case of the incoming rental requests. So let's go ahead and make them be cash customers. Okay. So with that set up back now, we go to the Post Online Contracts. We can see it continues to be locked. Let's go ahead and click Create Customer again. And just like I was saying before, it's going to go ahead and fill in a new customer record with all the details that were filled in online. Assuming that there's nothing else that needs to be filled in, we'll just go ahead and hit Save. And now Tom Rivers exists in our system as account number 503. Once the account exists, we can now see, if I get my head out of the way here, that all the rest of these buttons are now available. Now, in most cases, you're going to review what the customer is wanting over here to the right. This would say something like flute and the school and all those other details. This is not actually paired to a live website. This is just some test data that I've gotten here, so yours is going to probably look a little bit more fleshed out than mine. But what they're wanting to rent is going to be down here, along with the agreed upon rental rates and so forth. As far as any accessories and delivery choices that they selected, those will show up here in the top right, as far as in this case the care kit, the method book, etc., etc. And then right here in the middle, any additional tokens that they filled out, such as, like you can see here, social security numbers, student information, routing information, driver's license numbers. You can technically request anything that you want. If there is a specific field for that data to reside, it will go into that field. You might have noticed that the driver's license number went into the appropriate driver's license field. And anything that doesn't have a home, such as shoe size, for example. If you request shoe size or any other field that doesn't actually exist, that will just go in as notes on the customer's rental. Now, it's important to know at this point, the customer does not technically get guaranteed a rental. You may want to, if you need to, run them through a credit check. If I get my head out of the way, there is the opportunity to do a credit check right through AIM, pairing to whatever credit bureau that you're linked with, whether that's Experian or TransUnion or whatever the third one is. I can never remember all three simultaneously. That is something that is available with our active e-services. It's the ability to do a credit check. So if you do want to definitely make sure they are credit worthy, you can definitely check that out. We've got information on that online. You can also talk with our sales reps about that. But assuming they pass a credit check or you don't require one, if you have a suitable instrument available to go right away and you've got all the accessories ready to go, you can click the Create Contract and Invoice button. That will then bring you right into, and it's just letting me know I don't have SKUs for the care kit and the music stand and stuff like that. Again, this is a kind of a test system. But basically, it'll go right into an appropriate rental screen. In this case, it's not linked directly to a contract default. So I'm going to go ahead and select the rent to rent. And then at this point, I will go out and find whatever serial number is suitable to go onto the appropriate grade and instrument. So in this case, it would be something like a flute. I have an FL 1001 in here that I can throw onto the contract. And then whatever the agreed upon rates were, those will automatically be applied into here. Again, they're not showing up here just because this is a test system. You can see down here are the notes that I mentioned, in this case the shoe size as well as the teacher name. And then ultimately when I save, it will ask for how the customer is going to pay for that. Now, one of the things that I kind of glossed over here is the save CC to customer. The customer will have filled out their credit card information online. You're going to click this button and that will very securely pull that credit card token that was already generated on the website and attach that to their account. So that way when you get to the final step of running their contract as well as potentially their invoice, and if you again have everything ready to go, you can click this button to do both simultaneously, or you can do one or the other individually. But that way you'll have the card on file to actually run their card through Global or WorldPay, whichever merchant you are doing this with. And it's probably going to be Global because I believe, well, I think Global is just a little bit more compatible if you're doing this stuff online. Once you have created the contract and the invoice, these two buttons here, again, they're kind of grayed out right now because they haven't been completed, but there will be a View Contract button and a View Invoice button. You'll know that you have done those when those two buttons appear. Ultimately, it's really just a matter at that point of turning around, packaging up, and getting it shipped out. In this case, the customer asked for free school delivery, and we know that they are attending Audubon, so we would then get it ready to go on the next truck to Audubon. And then when you're ready to basically get this one marked and off the list, you will click the Process button right here by my nose. It's letting me know that the invoice nor the contract have actually been created. I'm just saying yes to override that, and it gets removed from this list. And then you're ready to move on to the next one. If for whatever reason you need to go back and either review or potentially adjust a contract that you marked as processed, up there at the top you can check mark process, and that will bring you to the list of the contracts that you have marked as such, and then from there you could make your adjustments or just simply review. But that is basically the whole idea of online contracts. So let me know if there's any questions about that. One thing I also want to mention, because there's quite obviously going to be a case where you probably have to step away from this process potentially midstream of working on a contract. And I didn't mention it, but you can set up a number of status codes. I've got failed credit check, passed credit check, waiting for serial number as potential statuses. And you can set up any status codes you want, and then by selecting a status code with it, that can be basically tied to that list so that when you come back, and it's hidden on this list, but if we go to the column chooser, we can grab and display the status here. Let me actually get it so it comes down here. Come on. There we go. So you can see it shows waiting for serial number on this list, and that way I can search and sort for those specific status codes that I've assigned to a given contract, a given rental request. As far as setting those up, they're back in the contract setup launcher, and it's the status option down here, and it's just making sure that you've got it set up here with the description and the status type of either all or contract status only, because this can get used in a couple of other areas, notably the online lessons and the online ordering process. So again, hopefully that all makes sense. Let me know if there's any questions. Let me make sure I get to Rich's question as we kind of wind down the session here. So Rich is asking, do you have any tips to make updates easy each year? For example, price updates and also mass updates when there are no teachers. As far as the price updates, we definitely have a utility for that. It's going to require that you do have, as far as like your accessories are concerned, back here in the, let me pull this up here. In the accessory area, as long as these are paired with an actual SKU, such as this Flute Method book, this has SKU HL1234, any and all of your accessories can be updated as far as price updates by going to the utility menu, where we then have an update accessory pricing. You simply select which location and price level combination would be used for updating those prices, and then by clicking proceed, it will go out, find all of the SKUs that exist on the accessory table, and then pair them up with that. As far as rental rates, rental and maintenance rates, those are just all at the plan and rate table area. You're going to want to, again, make sure that you have at least one, what I'll call master plan code. And it's just kind of a matter of going down this list and maintaining this however often you need to, whether that's every year or every 6 months or whatever the case may be. I'm afraid I don't have too much of a way to kind of make that any easier, except we do have technically an export function here that would allow you to export that out to an Excel spreadsheet, where you could then make some manipulations and then import that back in. So if you find yourself working in an Excel environment a little bit easier than working in this formatted layout here with an AIM, you could definitely do that. I can't really think of too much else, Rich, I'm afraid. I apologize as far as maintenance and keeping it up to speed. That's about the best advice I have, is trying to keep this as simple as possible while also still being detailed enough to make it worth everyone's while. So I'll stick around here just to see if there's any other questions that come in. In the meantime, let's talk a little bit about next month. So today's session wraps up the month of March. We're in March, right? Yes. And as far as the upcoming calendar for the month of April, it is going to be April after March. Last time I checked, I have 2 webinars or 2 live streams planned. So on Tuesday, April 12th, we'll be covering some tips and tricks on just the system in general. So basic navigation tips, usage tips, things like that. So definitely check that out if you are of interest in saving some mouse clicks, saving some time, increasing that efficiency level of using the system every day, which is what we are striving to do. And then on Tuesday, April 26th, that's going to be an open forum. So I'm calling it Ask the Professor. If you've ever done any of those broadcasts or like they're usually chat sessions on Reddit and other areas of the internet where they're usually known as Ask Me Anythings or AMAs. This is going to be like that. You'll be able to just come in. I'll probably I'll probably play it by ear for that session and see how long of a session we get. If it's the normal half hour, if it extends to a full hour, if it only lasts 15 minutes because no one shows up, we'll just have to see. But basically, bring any questions that you have to the table. I usually find that a fair number of the suggestions up in the poll don't necessarily warrant an entire live stream session devoted to them. So I've got a few things that I want to talk about already for that session. But by all means, still, if you have suggestions, definitely bring them to my attention in the poll area up here at the top of the video area toolbar. But I'm looking for suggestions, as always, in that area for May and June and beyond. So we're going to kind of shift a little bit. I think I'm going to do just 2 live streams each month now, the second and fourth Tuesday of each month. That gives me a little bit of flexibility as far as travel and other things that just are on my plate. But that way we can still hopefully do enough sessions to keep everyone satisfied as far as new and fresh content, and just keep things moving along with making our software better for you and getting you more acquainted with the software so that you can get more out of it. So yeah, definitely let me know any questions that you have in the poll up there on the toolbar. You can drop in anytime and just make a suggestion there. I do refresh that poll on a monthly basis, so any suggestions up to that point get removed and I put them into my vault here for consideration, and then you can vote on any existing recommendations there by upvoting or adding comments as necessary. Anne Marie has a question, or potentially a question. She says, this isn't online related, but if we have older contracts from pre-AIM-SI, would we enter them in as a shorter duration contract since they are already started? And that is a great question, Anne Marie. Typically, I'll probably have to wrap up on this because that could be kind of a long and involved answer, but just to keep it simple, I usually recommend one of 2 routes. First of all, it depends on whether you have access to that previous system. If it's something that gets shut off after a certain date, then by all means, you're going to need to key in that contract with as much information as you want to retain. And that might mean actually putting in the contract as of the original date that it started, and then putting in either one lump payment to catch you up or all the individual payments, again, depending on how much data and history you want to retain. If you are going to be able to access the system that you were using prior to going live with AIM or AIM-SI, and you need to keep tracking the contract going forward, then by all means you could key in that contract as of the existing or the current date, and then there's a field in the detail window where you could put in a previous credit. That would basically be a place where you could put in the amount of the payments that they've made up to that point, not including anything that wouldn't be on the contract balance, such as maintenance amounts and stuff like that. But that lets you basically catch the contract up. And so, for example, if it was a 3-year contract, 36 months, and they'd already paid a full year, you would put it in with 1 year's worth principal and tax into that previous credit area, and then that way it will know, oh, okay, that this amount has already been paid. We're only basically financing the remaining balance. So hopefully that helps there, Anne Marie. If you need additional assistance with that, or if you'd like to dedicate more one-on-one training, definitely reach out to me. We can definitely make that happen for you. If you just have other questions that are maybe semi-related or not related at all, you can always give our support team a call. I always recommend our support line as your initial call or your first point of contact, even if you're not sure if it's an AIM-related question. We love to help out wherever we can. So don't hesitate to give us a call. If nothing else, we'll tell you, hey, I'm afraid we can't help out with that. Here's potentially someone who can. So yeah, it's great seeing everyone today. Hopefully you're all doing well and excited for spring. and summer and fall, and hopefully a nice and exciting and profitable year for business. And we will see you next, not next Tuesday, but April 12th for the next broadcast. So again, I hope you can all make it a good one, and we'll see you then. Until then, take care.